I warned my wife about that man, just once. She laughed and said I was overthinking. 3 weeks later, a single photo destroyed our entire marriage. When I first married my wife, I used to think I'd somehow skipped ahead in life. I was 26, still figuring things out most days, still learning what kind of man I wanted to become. She, on the other hand, carried herself with a quiet confidence that made everything around her feel calmer. She was 42 when we met. Not in a way that felt like a number between us, but in the way she understood people, the way she listened before speaking, the way she seemed to notice the small things most people missed. Our home reflected that calm. Nothing fancy. Just a small house that always smelled faintly like coffee in the mornings and lavender in the evenings because of the candles she liked to light after dinner. Most mornings started the same way. I'd still be half asleep in the kitchen when she'd walk in, her hair loosely tied back, wearing one of those soft sweaters she loved. She always greeted me with the same gentle smile before wrapping her arms around me from behind. Her hugs were warm and steady, the kind that made you feel grounded. Sometimes she'd rest her chin lightly on my shoulder while reaching past me for a mug. "Morning," she'd say softly. Those little moments were my favorite part of the day. People sometimes stared when we were out together. I noticed it occasionally, the subtle double takes, the curiosity. But it never bothered us. If anything, she would just squeeze my hand a little tighter when she caught someone looking. She had this graceful kind of beauty that didn't demand attention but still somehow drew it. And I was proud to be the one walking beside her. For a long time, everything between us felt easy. Until a few months ago. It started with small changes. So small that I told myself I was imagining them. My wife worked at a marketing office downtown. She'd always talked about her coworkers at dinner, funny stories, little frustrations, the usual stuff. But one evening she mentioned a new guy who had just joined their department. "His name's Daniel," she said casually while stirring pasta on the stove. She didn't say much else about him at first. Just that he was new and still learning the ropes. I didn't think anything of it. But over the next couple of weeks, his name started coming up more often. At first it was harmless. "Daniel messed up a report today. Daniel asked me to show him how the system works. Daniel says the office coffee tastes like burnt cardboard." She laughed when she told those stories. And I laughed with her. Still, something about it sat strangely with me, not enough to worry, just enough to notice. Then one evening we were sitting on the couch after dinner, half watching a movie while she scrolled through her phone. Her screen lit up with a notification. I wasn't trying to look, but the name caught my eye. Daniel. She smiled faintly at whatever message he sent. Not a big smile. Just a small one. The kind people give when someone says something flattering. I felt something tighten in my chest, though I couldn't explain why. A few minutes later she set the phone down and leaned against me, her head resting lightly on my shoulder. Her hand found mine, fingers intertwining like they always did. Everything about the moment felt normal. Comfortable. Familiar. But for the first time in a long while, a quiet thought crept into the back of my mind. And I didn't like it. Not one bit. For a while, I tried to ignore the uneasy feeling growing in the back of my mind. I told myself it was nothing. People talk about coworkers all the time. It didn't mean anything. She had always been open with me about her day, and I didn't want to become the kind of husband who questioned every little detail. Still, something about it felt different. Over the next few weeks, Daniel's name kept appearing in small ways. Not constantly, but just often enough that I noticed. At dinner she would mention something he said during a meeting. While folding laundry, she'd recall some joke he made in the office. Each time she spoke about him, it seemed harmless. Casual. Almost routine. But one evening, something shifted. We were sitting together in the living room, the soft glow of a lamp filling the space while rain tapped gently against the windows. She had curled up beside me on the couch, one leg tucked under her as she absent-mindedly traced circles on the palm of my hand. Her touch was warm, familiar, the same quiet affection she'd always shown me. But her phone buzzed again on the coffee table. She glanced down at it. That same faint smile appeared for a split second before she turned the screen over. I noticed it this time. Not because it was obvious, but because I had started looking for it. I hesitated for a moment, weighing the words in my head. I didn't want to sound jealous or insecure. I trusted her. I always had. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something needed to be said. "Can I ask you something?" I said quietly. She looked up at me, curious but relaxed. "Of course." I shifted slightly on the couch, trying to find the right words. "That guy from work." "Daniel." Her eyebrows lifted just slightly. "What about him?" I took a breath. "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe I'm wrong. But it kind of feels like he's been texting you a lot lately." For a brief moment, her fingers stopped moving against my palm. Then she let out a soft laugh, not mocking, just amused. "You've been noticing that." She leaned her head lightly against my shoulder again. "He's new," she explained. "He asks a lot of questions. Work stuff mostly." Her hand squeezed mine reassuringly. I nodded slowly, but the feeling in my chest didn't completely settle. "I'm not saying you can't talk to him," I said carefully. "I just get a weird vibe from the way you talk about him sometimes." She sat up slightly then, studying my face. "Not angry. Just mildly surprised." "You're worried about him?" she asked. "Maybe a little," I admitted. For a moment she didn't say anything. The rain outside seemed louder in the silence. Then she reached up and gently touched my cheek, her thumb brushing lightly along my jaw. "You're overthinking," she said softly. Her voice carried that calm certainty she always had, the same tone that usually made my worries disappear. "He's just a coworker." I wanted to believe that. I really did. She leaned closer then and pressed a gentle kiss to my cheek, lingering there for a second. "Trust me," she whispered. Her words were warm, reassuring. And for a moment, the tension inside me eased. But the next night, she told me she was going out for drinks after work. With a few coworkers. Including Daniel. After that night, things didn't change all at once. If anything, life kept moving the same way it always had. Which somehow made the small differences feel even more noticeable. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid. She had gone out with coworkers before. It wasn't unusual. She still came home, still greeted me with the same soft smile, still asked how my day had been. But slowly, little details started to shift. She began coming home later than usual. Not dramatically late, just enough that dinner sometimes cooled on the stove while I waited. When she walked through the door, she would still kiss my cheek like she always had. Her perfume would linger faintly in the air as she passed by me in the kitchen. But the hug didn't last quite as long. And sometimes her mind seemed somewhere else. One night she sat across from me at the table, absently stirring her food while staring at her phone. I noticed her smile at something on the screen before quickly locking it. "Work stuff?" I asked casually. She nodded without looking up. "Yeah. Just messages from the office." I didn't push further. But a quiet weight settled in my chest again. Weeks passed like that. Small changes. Small silences. Nothing dramatic enough to cause a fight, but enough to make the house feel different. One evening she fell asleep on the couch. The TV was still playing quietly, casting a soft flickering glow across the living room. An empty glass of wine sat on the coffee table beside her. She looked exhausted. Her head had tilted slightly to the side, a few strands of her dark hair falling loosely across her face. For a moment, seeing her like that reminded me of the woman I had fallen in love with, the calm, graceful presence that once made every room feel warmer. I walked over quietly and grabbed a blanket from the chair nearby. As I draped it gently over her shoulders, she stirred in her sleep. Her hand suddenly reached out and wrapped around my wrist. I froze for a second. Her eyes stayed closed, but she pulled my hand closer to her chest, holding it there loosely. It was something she used to do when we first started living together, reaching for me in her sleep like she wanted to make sure I was still there. My chest tightened. For a moment, everything felt like it used to. But after a few seconds, her grip loosened. Her hand slipped away. She turned slightly on the couch and settled back into sleep. I stood there for a moment longer before quietly stepping away. As I reached the coffee table, her phone lit up with a new notification. The screen glowed in the dark room. I hadn't meant to look. But the name caught my eye instantly. Daniel. Just a short message preview appeared on the screen. Had fun tonight. You always make work a lot more interesting. My stomach sank. I didn't open the message. I didn't touch the phone at all. Instead, I just stood there in the quiet living room, the TV humming softly in the background. Across the couch, my wife slept peacefully under the blanket I'd just placed over her. And for the first time since we had gotten married, our home felt strangely unfamiliar. Like something important had started slipping away. And neither of us had said it out loud yet. For a while after that night, I carried the uneasy feeling with me like a quiet weight I couldn't put down. I didn't confront her about the message. I didn't ask questions. Part of me was afraid of the answer. Life between us continued, at least on the surface. We still shared meals, still watched shows together in the evenings. She still leaned against me sometimes on the couch, her head resting lightly on my shoulder. But something invisible had settled between us. A thin layer of distance. And the worst part was, I couldn't tell if she noticed it too. Then one evening, everything changed. I was at work when my phone buzzed with a message from an old acquaintance of mine, someone who lived near the downtown area where my wife worked. We didn't talk often, so the message caught me off guard. Hey. I think I just saw your wife. At first, that didn't seem strange. She worked downtown, after all. But then another message followed. A photo. For a moment, I just stared at the screen without opening it. My thumb hovered over the image like I already knew I wouldn't like what I saw. Still, curiosity pushed me to tap it. The photo filled the screen. It was taken inside a bar. Dim lighting. Wooden tables. The kind of place people go to unwind after work. And there she was. My wife. Sitting very close beside Daniel. Too close. Their shoulders were touching, their heads leaned slightly toward each other as if they were sharing something private. She was laughing at something he had said, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Not the kind of touch you give a stranger. Not the kind you give a coworker. It was familiar. Comfortable. Intimate. The same kind of gentle touch she used to give me when we first started dating. My chest felt hollow as I stared at the image. For a long time, I didn't move. I didn't respond to the message either. What was there to say? By the time I got home that evening, the house was quiet. I sat in the living room for nearly an hour before I heard the front door open. She stepped inside like any other night, setting her bag down by the door. When she saw me sitting there, she smiled, though it looked slightly tired. Hey, she said softly. I studied her face for a moment. For years, I had been able to read her expressions easily. Every subtle emotion, every flicker of thought behind her eyes. But tonight, something felt closed off. Hey, I replied. She walked over and leaned down to kiss my cheek the way she always did when she got home. Her hand brushed gently against my shoulder. Long day, she asked. I hesitated before answering. Where were you tonight? It was a simple question. But I saw the shift in her expression immediately. Just a brief pause. A single second of hesitation. I stayed late at work, she said. That was the moment something inside me sank. Because that pause had already told me the truth. Slowly, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Without saying another word, I opened the photo and turned the screen toward her. Her eyes dropped to it. And for the first time since I'd known her, the calm confidence she always carried disappeared. For days after seeing that message on her phone, I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting. People texted their coworkers all the time. A friendly message didn't mean anything. At least, that's what I kept telling myself whenever the thought crept back into my mind. Still, something inside me had changed. I started noticing more than I used to. The little pauses when she checked her phone. The way she sometimes turned the screen slightly away when replying to a message. The distracted look in her eyes during conversations. None of it was proof. But together, it created a quiet storm of doubt that wouldn't go away. Then one afternoon, everything shifted. I was sitting at my desk at work when my phone buzzed with a message from an old acquaintance, someone who lived near the area where my wife's office was located. We weren't particularly close, but we had mutual friends, and we occasionally checked in with each other. At first, the message seemed harmless. "Hey man, random question. Is your wife downtown tonight?" I frowned at the screen, confused. "Yeah, probably," I replied. "Why?" A few seconds passed before another message appeared. "I don't want to cause problems, but I thought you should see this." Then a photo came through. For a moment, I just stared at the notification. Something in my chest tightened before I had even opened it. Finally, I tapped the image. The photo filled my screen. It had clearly been taken inside a bar, dim lighting, soft yellow lamps hanging above wooden tables. The background was blurred with people talking and laughing. But the two figures in the center were unmistakable. My wife. And Daniel. They were sitting close together in a booth, far closer than coworkers usually sat. Their shoulders were nearly touching. My wife leaned slightly toward him, her head tilted as she laughed at something he had said. Her hand rested gently on his arm. Not awkwardly. Not accidentally. Comfortably. Like it belonged there. For a few seconds, the world around me seemed to go completely quiet. I stared at the photo again and again, hoping I had misunderstood something. Maybe the angle made it look worse than it was. But the more I looked, the clearer it became. This wasn't a casual work drink. It was something else. By the time I got home that evening, my mind felt heavy with questions I didn't know how to ask. The house was silent when I walked in. I sat down in the living room and waited. Nearly an hour passed before the front door finally opened. She stepped inside carrying her purse, kicking off her shoes near the door the way she always did. When she saw me sitting there, she smiled warmly. "Hey," she said, walking over. She leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to my cheek, her hand resting briefly on my shoulder. "Long day?" she asked. I studied her face carefully. For years, I had known every small expression she made. Every shift in her voice. But tonight, I was searching for something else. "Where were you tonight?" I asked quietly. The question seemed simple enough. But the moment the words left my mouth, I saw the pause. Just a second. Barely noticeable. "I stayed late at work," she said. That single hesitation was enough. Without another word, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. My hands felt strangely steady as I opened the photo and turned the screen toward her. Her eyes dropped to the image. The confident calm she always carried disappeared almost instantly. And in its place, I saw something I had never seen on her face before. Fear. For several seconds after she saw the photo, the room fell completely silent. Her eyes stayed fixed on the screen in my hand, her expression frozen somewhere between shock and panic. I watched the color slowly drain from her face. She didn't try to speak right away. She didn't even try to deny it. That silence told me more than any explanation could. Finally, she looked up at me. "I can explain," she said quickly, her voice unsteady. I didn't respond. I simply set my phone down on the coffee table between us and leaned back in my chair. Okay, I said quietly. Explain. She ran a hand through her hair, something she only did when she was nervous. For years, I had always admired her calmness, the way she handled difficult situations without losing control. But tonight, that calm confidence was gone. It's not what it looks like, she said. The words felt automatic, almost like she had rehearsed them in her mind. He's just a coworker. We grabbed a drink after work. That's all. I nodded slowly. And the hand on his arm. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out at first. It was nothing, she finally said. Just a moment. I didn't even realize I was doing it. I studied her face carefully. For years, I had trusted this woman more than anyone else in the world. I had believed every word she spoke without hesitation. But now I found myself searching her expression for cracks. You told me you stayed late at work, I said calmly. Her shoulders dropped slightly. I didn't want you to overreact. A quiet bitterness rose in my chest. I asked you to be careful around him, I reminded her. Do you remember that? She nodded slowly. I know. I told you something about him didn't feel right. I know. The room felt heavy with unsaid things. Finally, she sat down across from me, leaning forward slightly. It started harmless, she admitted softly. He was new, and he asked me for help a lot. We talked at work, then sometimes after work. Her voice trembled slightly as she continued. I liked the attention, she said, almost in a whisper. That sentence hit harder than anything else she had said. I'm 42, she continued quietly. Most people my age start feeling invisible after a while. But with him, he made me feel noticed again. I listened without interrupting. But it never meant anything serious, she added quickly. It was just conversation. Just drinks sometimes. She reached across the table then, her fingers moving slowly toward my hand. For years, that small gesture had always comforted me. But this time, when her fingers brushed mine, I pulled my hand back. Not angrily. Just instinctively. The movement seemed to hit her harder than any words. Her hand froze in the air before slowly retreating. Tears began to gather in her eyes. I didn't think it would hurt you like this, she whispered. I let out a slow breath. That's the problem, I said quietly. You didn't think about it at all. The room fell silent again. The distance between us felt wider than the entire house. And for the first time since we met, I realized something inside our marriage had finally broken. The days after that conversation felt strangely quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet we used to share on slow evenings together, but a heavier silence that settled into every room of the house. We still lived under the same roof, but something essential between us had shifted. She moved more carefully around me now, like someone afraid of making the wrong step. In the mornings, she still woke up before me like she always had. I could hear the faint sounds of dishes in the kitchen, the coffee machine humming softly. But the warm hugs that used to greet me were gone. Instead, she would offer a small, hesitant smile. Morning, she would say quietly. I'd nod back. Most of our conversations had become short and practical. About groceries, bills, work schedules. Anything that avoided the deeper wound sitting between us. One evening I came home to the smell of something familiar. She was standing in the kitchen, stirring a pot on the stove. The scent immediately brought back memories. It was my favorite meal, the one she used to cook on special occasions when we first started dating. For a moment, I just stood there watching her. She looked tired. Not physically, but emotionally drained, like someone who had been carrying a heavy weight for days. When she noticed me, she turned with a small hopeful smile. I thought, maybe we could have dinner together tonight, she said softly. Her voice carried a fragile kind of hope. I nodded slowly and sat at the table. The meal was good. She had always been a great cook. But the warmth that used to fill the kitchen during our dinners was missing. We ate mostly in silence. Occasionally she would glance up at me, like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the courage. After dinner we moved to the living room. She sat beside me on the couch, leaving a small gap between us. For several minutes neither of us spoke. Then, slowly, she moved closer. Her hand reached toward mine again. This time, her fingers trembled slightly before touching my hand. "I ended it," she said quietly. I looked at her. "With Daniel," she clarified. "I told him not to contact me again." Her voice cracked a little. "It wasn't worth losing you." For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to believe her. Part of me remembered the years we had spent building a life together. But another part of me, the part that had seen that photo, heard that hesitation in her voice, couldn't forget. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Tears began sliding down her cheeks now, slow and quiet. "I should have listened to you." Her hand tightened around mine slightly. "I didn't realize how far things had gone until I saw the look on your face that night." I could hear the regret in her voice. Real regret. But the strange thing about broken trust is that even when the apology is sincere, the damage doesn't disappear. After a moment, I gently slipped my hand out of hers. Not roughly. Just carefully. The movement made her shoulders sink. "I believe you regret it," I said softly. But something between us changed. She looked down at the floor, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. For the first time since we had met, she looked completely lost. And the hardest part was knowing that no matter how much she wished she could undo the past, some things simply couldn't be repaired. The decision didn't happen all at once. It came slowly, quietly, over the following days. The kind of realization that settles into your mind piece by piece until one morning you wake up and understand that something has already ended. We still lived in the same house. We still shared the same routines. But the warmth that once filled our home was gone. Every conversation felt careful now, like we were both trying not to step on something fragile. One evening, a week after everything came out, I found her sitting at the kitchen table. The same place where we used to drink coffee together every morning. She had a cup in front of her, but the coffee had gone cold. Her fingers rested around the mug as she stared quietly out the window. The soft evening sunlight was coming through the glass, casting long shadows across the table. When she noticed me standing there, she gave a faint smile. "Can we talk?" she asked. I pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then she took a slow breath. "I know what you're thinking," she said softly. I didn't answer. She looked down at the table, her fingers tracing the edge of the mug. "I broke your trust," she continued. "And I know saying sorry isn't enough." Her voice trembled slightly, but she kept speaking. "I keep replaying that night in my head, the moment you showed me that photo. The look on your face." She paused, swallowing hard. "I've never seen you look that hurt before." The room felt heavy with emotion. "I wish I had listened to you," she said quietly. "You weren't trying to control me. You were trying to protect what we had." Her words echoed the same realization she had come to over the past week. But the truth was, I had already come to my own realization too. "I loved you," I said gently. Her eyes lifted to meet mine. "And part of me always will." The words made her eyes fill with tears again. "But love isn't the problem," I continued. She seemed to understand immediately. Trust. That was the thing that had broken. And once trust cracks, it's hard to make it whole again. She wiped her tears slowly. "So, this is it?" she asked quietly. I nodded. Neither of us raised our voices. There was no anger left. Just sadness. She stood up slowly and walked around the table toward me. For a moment, we simply looked at each other. Then she wrapped her arms around me. The hug felt familiar, warm, steady, just like the ones she used to give me every morning in the kitchen. Except this one lasted longer. Like she was trying to hold on to something that was already slipping away. I hugged her back. For the last time. When she finally stepped away, her eyes were red but calm. As she picked up her bag near the door, she paused and looked back at me. "I should have listened," she whispered. The door closed softly behind her. And for the first time since we met, the house felt truly empty.